everyone, and welcome to Speak Your Truth podcast. I'm Kristen Bomas, and we are on a conscious journey to enlightenment. I'm sitting here with one of my business partners, and we're talking about the social justice warriors and the toxic masculinity and the political correctness, and we started talking about Shira. And it's interesting, I think what I'm learning, and I'm sure he'll pipe in as necessary, but here we have a group of people who have decided that they are the warriors on behalf of social justice, and so they have chosen to step in wherever there appears to be judgment or misrepresentation on behalf of any subculture or other culture, at least here in our country. And that thought in and of itself makes me uncomfortable, because who am I to say how it feels for another subculture to feel when they're called a particular name or presented in a particular way? I had a friend who was a native Indian to this country and took great offense to being called a Native American. So I guess these people and their ego believe that they know what these other people are going to feel, think, and experience when particular terms are used. Now, I think we're all in agreement that harsh judgment is uncalled for, period. I certainly am not a believer in destructive name calling and judgments of anyone. I think that we are all one, and the diversity, and especially in this country, is so magical. I would never want to lose it. But we get so tied up in the labels that we become judgment oriented, even if we think we're doing it in the name of the absence of judgment. So the ego of these troops that are, going to battle on behalf of these people, they're making assumptions, and it is in their judgment that they're naming judgment. So at what point does this circle of judgment not just explode? That's not what we're here to do. It's not our job to judge or to judge the judgers. We're not here for that. We're here to speak our own truth. If it makes you uncomfortable to say it. We were talking in particular about the new Shira character and how she was portrayed in this latest version on Netflix. And she's truly androgynous. And what's wrong with being a female hero? There's nothing wrong with that. As a woman who believes that we have been defined in a very objective and defaming way over thousands of years, I think we could have changed the presentation without losing the fact that she's a woman. We could have taken her out of the skimpy. We could have taken her out of that V8 kind of figure. We could have we could have left the shorts under the skirt, as long as we left the skirt. But so much was done. We took the softness out of her face and made it more masculine. We pulled the hair back so much that we can't tell if it's her having long flowing hair, which is so much the power of woman, or if it's all chopped off and tucked back to lose that power. So there are things that were done that are as judgmental as they were. There's no difference. A woman is a woman. A woman has a curved figure. As we get older, we get a little bit more curvy, and that's what we do. But we're still a woman, and we're still in a woman's body. And there's still a beauty about a woman's body as there is a beauty about a man's body, and we are not the same. Nor do we need to be. I think one of the greatest problems that happened with feminism is we were defining ourselves back in the 70s as men. We don't want to be men. We want to be women. But we also don't want to be objects to the world. And so what did we do in that Shira image? Did we really accomplish anything at all? Not at all. We did nothing as women to allow ourselves to be defined by women as women. Instead, we took away the femininity and made it androgynous, as if we can't possibly portray ourselves as women without being objects. Of course we can. And we cannot call a Black American without loving them. Of course we can. We can't believe in our Black Americans because we say Black Americans instead of African American. Yes, that's the new phrase now. And that's nice, but not all of our Black Americans come from Africa. And I think that's pretty judgmental in and of itself. There's a beautiful history coming in from Africa. I think our slaves were ripped out of their homeland of Africa to be brought here. And that breaks my heart. And many of you know how I feel about that. And I'm a real trooper about understanding that. But who are we to say what they prefer to be called? It's something that I think all of us need to start to ask. We're not helping communication between the cultures if we don't ask. It's if the African American or Black American culture wants to be defined by a label, what label would they like to be defined by? As a woman, I want to still be called a woman. I don't want to be called a girl. And the definition of what I want to have is, by definition, who I am as a human being with the grace and the power and the healing, the embrace, the idea of community, just everything that I'm about as a woman. My body is whatever it is. That's not how I want to be defined. So I ask all of you to think about what's happening here. Toxic masculinity, what the heck is that? I don't even want to try to figure that one out. Have we socialized our men in such a way that we have some problems? Yeah. And are men socializing men in such a way that there's some significant problems? Yeah. Okay, that is what it is. So we look at the history of all of this. We look at the history of the way women have been objectified, the way men have been socialized to objectify. And we look at this Me Too movement that's come into play here a year ago, and we see that change is needed and we're ready for change. And as women, we're ready to have a voice, and that voice has really shaken everybody up. But we're not here to judge anyone. Initially, it's going to come across that way, that we're judging the perpetrators, that we're judging men, that we're judging, but that's not what we're here to say. We're here to say that we're not going to tolerate ourselves being defined the way we were defined or violated the way we were violated. Done. So now that seems to be penetrating some of these things. As we were talking, I felt like, this whole righteous, what's right, what's wrong is really creating greater judgment. And now then they're fighting over each other, calling each other names and judging each other harshly over what they've done or not done. And it's really spiraling, from what I'm understanding, it's spiraling out of control. And that breaks my heart, because the intention here is to move beyond the judgment and open up the doors to greater acceptance. But in fact, because everybody's ego is involved, it appears that we have, through ego, built more and more and more of a flow of judgment until it's become ultimately destructive. In the course of all of this, nonsense that appears to be, kind of coming up, and it'll settle. I do believe it'll settle, but that it's not okay to be feminine, it's not okay to be masculine, that there's this, absence of either, to come to a middle ground of an absence of the binary. That's not actually what this earth is about at this time. Although I do think we're evolving to a point where there is no dualistic model. We are in that transition time. Maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe in this klutzy period where we're trying to redefine the dualistic model to a higher realm where there's only one, that this is part of the upset, and I'm sure it is. But the fear that's driving this rejection and judgment, that's causing this greater divisiveness through not being able to appreciate a time where we're attempting to learn about each other, is probably more damaging than not. So it'll settle. I do believe that we're at a time in this life where everything is kind of in upheaval, and that everybody is, fighting to do what's right and fighting for what they believe and fighting. Like, we're just at a time where everybody seems to be fighting, And I would love to say to all of you, stop your fight. Get your ego and your fear out of the equation. Yes, there are mistakes, and yes, we're coming out of a time where we realize that women have been portrayed sexually beyond our comfort. But we also know that men were socialized in a way that might be beyond their comfort. We understand that our subcultures in a lot of cases are treated unfairly. Yeah, I'm not going to negate any of that. So what can we do through love and acceptance and compassion to help everybody start to learn? How can we explore one another rather than judge one another or label one another? Any label is limiting. Change it all you want, it's the same limitation. When you start taking characters out of a 30-year-old comic strip, animation film, we have a problem. You know, just because for 30 years it was okay, it doesn't mean that we're okay with an Indian character being portrayed the way it's portrayed, but it's still part of that situation. And let those of India tell us how that feels and what that's about. Maybe they're finding humor in the stereotypical aspects. Maybe they're not. I don't think that The Simpsons are any less stereotypical, quite frankly, and I don't see us changing them. So where do we stop with the stereotypes? Where do we stop with the judgments? I ask all of you to think about that, because from what I understand in this social justice warrior, in this toxic masculinity, in this politically correctness, we have found yet another way to judge one another. Another way to not be responsible for learning about the diversity in one another. We are not stepping into our compassion and embracing those who use a label and embracing the ones who have the label. Let's start to unify and start to look within ourselves. There isn't a single label that doesn't limit you, right? Whether you're a man or a woman, gay or not gay, any of those labels limit you. I don't care if you're labeled by your dark hair or your blonde hair. It limits you. American, Indian, indigenous person, it labels you. Who are you? What are you about inside? That should come from you. None of us have the right to label the other. Let's do our best to look at each other from eyes of balance and compassion and see if we can't start a brand new beginning in making change on this earth. Be sure to subscribe if you liked our talk today. Thank you.